London, 1951. Rain hammered against black government cars parked outside a quiet townhouse. Inside, a British intelligence officer stood frozen beside an empty desk. Files gone. Passport missing. One of their own had vanished. Not a low-level clerk. Not a diplomat. A senior British spy. And as MI5 searched the apartment in panic, a horrifying realization spread through Whitehall. The Soviet Union had infiltrated the heart of British intelligence for decades. Not with soldiers.
No, that's all right.
Not with
This is
assassins.
pretty close proximity-wise.
But with young men from Cambridge University. Elegant. Educated. Brilliant. The perfect English gentlemen. History would remember them as the Cambridge Five. And by the time Britain understood the betrayal, an entire generation had already been compromised. Cambridge University, 1930s. The old stone courtyards looked peaceful. Students debated philosophy beneath cathedral arches while Europe drifted toward catastrophe. But beneath the academic charm, something dangerous was growing. A generation had lost faith in capitalism. The Great Depression had shattered economies. Fascism was rising across Europe. Hitler marched through Germany. Mussolini ruled Italy. And many elite students believed democracy was already dying. Among them were several young intellectuals who would eventually become the most infamous spy ring in British history. Kim Philby. Charming. Confident. Well-connected. Philby could walk into any room and immediately belong there. Then there was Guy Burgess. Brilliant but reckless. An alcoholic with a sharp tongue and dangerous political views. Donald Maclean. Highly intelligent. Emotionally unstable. Working inside Britain's Foreign Service. Anthony Blunt. Cultured. Calm. Quietly connected to the royal establishment. And finally, John Cairns-Cross. The least famous. Possibly the most underestimated. Together, they would become known as the Cambridge Five. But in the beginning, they were simply idealistic students looking for meaning in a collapsing world. And Soviet intelligence noticed them immediately. The Soviet Union understood something Western intelligence underestimated for years. The best spies were not recruited with money. They were recruited with belief. Soviet agents operating in Britain searched universities for young elites who hated fascism and distrusted capitalism. Cambridge was perfect. The students came from wealthy families, elite schools, political circles, future government institutions. The strategy was terrifyingly patient. Do not recruit ordinary spies. Recruit future leaders. The Soviets instructed their new assets to hide all visible communist sympathies. No party membership. No public radicalism. Blend in completely. Become establishment figures. And over time, they did exactly that. Kim Philby entered British intelligence. Donald Maclean moved into the Foreign Office. Anthony Blunt entered military intelligence during World War II. Guy Burgess floated through the BBC, diplomacy, and intelligence circles. The Soviet Union had quietly inserted agents into the highest levels of the British state before World War II had even begun. And nobody noticed. Europe exploded into war. Nazi Germany invaded Poland. Britain entered World War II. Suddenly, intelligence became more valuable than armies. Inside Britain's secret services, trust became essential. And that trust gave the Cambridge spies extraordinary access. Philby eventually worked inside MI6 counterintelligence. His job was literally hunting Soviet agents. Which meant Moscow now had insight into Britain's anti-Soviet operations. Every investigation, every suspicion, every defector, potentially compromised. Meanwhile, Donald Maclean gained access to highly classified diplomatic material involving both Britain and the United States. By the end of the war, the spies were feeding Moscow enormous amounts of information. Some historians believe Soviet intelligence received thousands of classified documents through the Cambridge network. Then came the most dangerous secret of all: the atomic bomb. As the United States developed nuclear weapons under the Manhattan Project, Western governments desperately tried to contain Soviet access to nuclear intelligence. They failed. While other Soviet spies operated inside America, the Cambridge network helped Moscow understand Western nuclear strategy and diplomatic positioning during the early Cold War. The balance of global power shifted permanently. And the West still had no idea how deeply it had been penetrated. World War II ended. But almost immediately, a new conflict emerged. The Cold War. Former allies became enemies overnight. The United States and Britain now faced the Soviet Union in a global intelligence war built on secrecy, infiltration, and fear. Inside Western governments, suspicion spread everywhere. Who could be trusted? Who was leaking information? Who was secretly working for Moscow? Then the first cracks appeared. American intelligence intercepted encrypted Soviet communications through a classified counterintelligence effort later associated with the Venona project. The decryptions hinted at high-level Soviet penetration inside British institutions. But identifying the spies proved painfully difficult. The suspects were respected establishment figures. Educated, connected, protected by class privilege. Many investigators literally could not imagine upper-class British gentlemen betraying their country. That assumption became the spies' greatest weapon. Pressure closed in around Donald Maclean. Evidence was mounting. British intelligence feared a Soviet mole existed inside the Foreign Office. Kim Philby learned investigators were getting close. So the network acted. Guy Burgess suddenly left Britain with Donald Maclean. Both vanished. Days later, reports confirmed they had resurfaced in Moscow. The scandal detonated across Britain. Newspapers exploded. Government officials panicked. The public could barely comprehend the betrayal. Two elite British insiders had defected directly to the Soviet Union. But even worse, many investigators now suspected there had to be a third man. Someone had warned them. That suspicion eventually focused on Kim Philby. Yet Philby remained astonishingly protected. Friends defended him. Senior officials doubted the accusations. British class loyalty still shielded him. For years, he survived investigation after investigation. Then finally, in 1963, Philby disappeared from Beirut. Soon afterward, the truth became undeniable. He too had defected to Moscow. One of the most devastating intelligence betrayals in British history was now fully exposed. Or so they thought. The most disturbing aspect of the Cambridge Five was not merely espionage. It was performance. For decades, these men maintained entirely separate realities. At dinner parties, they joked with intelligence officers hunting Soviet spies. They attended elite social gatherings, worked inside government ministries, advised Western leaders, all while secretly serving Moscow. Kim Philby reportedly betrayed anti-Soviet agents who were later imprisoned or executed. Operations collapsed after reaching Soviet ears. Western intelligence agencies became infected with paranoia. Trust evaporated. Even Allied governments began questioning British security systems. The damage stretched far beyond stolen documents. The Cambridge Five shattered confidence itself. And intelligence organizations cannot function without trust. The scandal permanently damaged Britain's global intelligence reputation. The United States became more cautious sharing classified information. MI5 and MI6 faced humiliation. Political leaders feared additional hidden agents still existed inside the system. Anthony Blunt was eventually exposed years later. Shockingly, he had also served as surveyor of the king's pictures for the royal household. A Soviet spy had operated near the British monarchy itself. Meanwhile, John Cairncross was identified separately after years of uncertainty surrounding the true size of the network. Even today, historians still debate whether there were exactly 5 members or more. Because that is the terrifying legacy of successful espionage. You never know the full extent of the damage. The Cambridge Five were not monsters in the traditional sense. They did not command armies. They did not fire weapons. Most looked like refined professors or diplomats. That was precisely why they succeeded. They weaponized trust. Their betrayal exposed a painful weakness inside the British establishment. The belief that class, education, and status guaranteed loyalty. It did not. For decades, some of the most sensitive secrets in the Western world quietly flowed from London to Moscow through men who sounded perfect, dressed perfectly, and belonged perfectly. The Cold War was filled with missiles, assassinations, and nuclear fear. But some of its greatest battles were fought silently. Inside offices. Behind diplomatic smiles. And across polished wooden desks in London. Because sometimes the most dangerous spy is not the stranger outside the gate. It is the man already sitting inside the room. Fade to black.